Alright, so I haven't done one of these videos in a while, but I figured since I want to test out some stuff here, I'll go live and see if anyone cares. Alright, so what I'm doing here is I've recently started trying to gesso some sketch cards that I was working on. Oh shoot. And I got some really interesting results, more related to the way the paint behaves. I think really the reason I did it is because the paper stock of most sketch cards is not very good. So trying to see if maybe adding a layer of gesso will improve the performance of the paint. So yeah, so what I've done here is this piece here, this is gessoed, and I just use Deco premium white gesso just because that's what I had on hand. This part is just plain paper, well, not plain paper, it's whatever illustration board, or I think this is mixed media paper, can't remember the brand. So what I did originally, I did a quick, well, not so quick, I did a full size sketch of the flash here. Then I took a picture of it, took it into Photoshop, scaled it down to sketch card size, which is 2.5 by 3.5 inches. Printed it out, ended up with this, so you can see the print. Then just did a carbon transfer. Just rub, I think, like B2 pencil or B4 pencil on the back, and then just tape it on in place, and just with a pen I went over kind of the key lines twice, and then that way I have two almost identical pieces, so I can test. And I'm working at sketch card size primarily because it's small and I'll be able to do this pretty quickly, as well as that if it comes out nice, then maybe I'll put it on Etsy, see if anyone's interested in buying it. So I'm gonna do a simple low-key painting here. For the paint I'm using, again, Deco, just plain deep red. I'm gonna do a wash of that over both of them. Hopefully it dries quickly. I know the paper will dry really quickly because it absorbs the water. The gesso piece might not dry so fast, so we'll see what happens. So I'm gonna do a wash of the deep red. Hopefully as it dries, do a couple of different levels or a couple of more layers of paint on it to kind of build it out. I might, depending on how timing goes, maybe mix it up a little bit with, again, some more Deco Art. Copenhagen blue will give me a nice deep purple. For the shadows, I'm not going to use any blacks, mainly because I don't think I have any here. And I also have some Liquitex glazing medium, just in case I need it, but I generally don't for these. And oh, I also have some white, which gotta have some white. Pretty sure this is the same brand. I don't know what's, actually I don't even know what brand this is. Looking on the size, it just might be the Michael's House brand, but it's not a titanium white, it's a zinc white, so it's not perfectly opaque. So yeah, in terms of other materials, because I know some people care, for the brushes I have a couple of dealer roundly, whatever. So I'm going to use a flat 1/2 inch to do the wash, and then a number 5 round, and probably a number 3 round for the details. This little guy's here to hopefully get the camera to stay in focus all the time. I'm using an old phone for filming, and it just, I don't know, for some reason it keeps on shifting focus, so we'll lock focus. Other than that, got some water, a rag, and for my palette I'm just using a piece of glass taped up so I don't cut myself. I already put the red there, some water, we'll mix it up and let's see what happens. Yeah, that's about it. music is just some house music playlist on YouTube. Probably get a copyright flag on this one, but yeah, whatever. This is just for fun. So we're just gonna dive right in. I know I only have like 45 minutes for this, so let me actually put a timer in so I know. We'll see how far we get in it. And yeah, anyone chimes in with any questions or anything, just let me know. I'll try to answer them. There's a little bit of delay. Yeah, that's that. So what I'm doing kind of off camera here is I'm just mixing a bit of water with my deep red, and I have lots of room here to test. So I'm gonna do everything on the plain paper side first, and then mimic it on the gesso side, mainly because I'm right-handed, so that way I always work from left to right, and I don't end up smudging the right-hand side. Now, if the gesso does take a while to dry, that might be a problem, but we'll see what happens. So here we go. So this initial wash, I'm gonna try to keep it as even as I can, and get as much coverage as I can as well. Most of this is not going to be visible at the end, so it doesn't really matter how great it is, but yeah. The thing that I've learned with washes is that you have to be careful not to overwork an area, because you'll get a hard edge, which is what's happening here. Because I'm working very wet, I can blend the edge a little bit, but this is acrylic paint, so you're a little limited what you can do. See, I got that one stripe going right through his eye, which is going to drive me nuts, but try not to overwork it. So while that dries a little bit, I'll do the same thing on the gesso side and see if it behaves the same. Should get a little bit more pigment on it. I think because the gesso piece won't allow the paper to absorb the paint as quick, might get some more brush strokes, and it's also not as bright or saturated. Now, the one thing I noticed right away with gesso is that it is pure white, or a much stronger white than the paper. Yeah, and see, this is what's happening. It's not as quick to absorb the paint, so I can actually get a much, looks like I'm getting a much nicer wash, but it's not as saturated, so I'm gonna have to do another one right on top while it's still wet. Try to get a little bit more pigment, but yeah, definitely different behavior. And this is actually going to be a little interesting as I'm working on these pieces side by side, because yeah, they're they really are behaving in a different way. Though I like, and it's hard to tell in the video, I like the way this feels on the brush. I really like the fact that the plain untreated part just absorbed the pigment and gave me a nicer, a quicker, I guess, wash. So I'm gonna have to go over this one. Ah, here we go. Now we're getting there. I am getting the brush strokes, but I should be able to blend those pretty quickly, I hope. get somewhat even coverage. Oh, I see it's picking it up. That's not what I want. Hey Joe, thanks for joining. Okay, this is getting into that overworking part that I was talking about before, because I really want to get a stronger pigment here, but every time I brush over, because it's not fully dry, actually I think I'm just taking some of the pigment away, so hopefully that will sit steady. Now one thing I have to do, I'm gonna tape this piece of paper down because it's moving, so I'm just gonna grab some masking tape here and just take my paper to the desk. I really hope the audio is coming through. Right. So I'm gonna give this another minute, and I'm gonna go back in on the paper side. There we go. Have a little sip of coffee. And let's see if it's dry. And this feels pretty dry to the touch. I'm gonna leave that for now. I'm gonna grab my, what's the number 5 round? It's number 5? Yeah. Number 5 round, and pick up a little bit more, a thicker coat of paint. That's a little too thick. And mix. I'm not using any medium right now. Yeah, this is just paint with water. I think that's a good consistency, like the way that's behaving. I'm just gonna go in now and do a couple of washes over the shadow areas, and I'm using a reference photo just from, I think this is the Justice League movie poster or teaser poster or something. So all the areas that are blocked in, for shadows, I'm going to start doing hopefully an even wash to start creating some separation. I'm not terribly concerned with the likeness of, I can't remember the actor's name. It's more about the shapes that I'm laying down, the way the paint's behaving. Now, one thing that I know from other exercises doing this is that if you're too wet, especially on this paper, this general sketch card paper that gets shipped from the publishers, the paint does bleed, which is, going back, one of the reasons why I try to gesso it, to give me a little bit more control. So I have to be very careful to use a very thin stroke. of the darkest spots on this outside of the background is the shadow being cast by his nose. So I want to make sure I get a nice heavy application of color and his nostrils. And that's because the top lights out the bottom of the nose, and the shadow that it casts on his face is very strong. Now, I may have gone a little too dark with the initial pencil underlay because it's definitely showing through and muddying up my colors a little bit, but it is what it is. One thing that, no, this is not a pro technique or anything, or tip or anything like that, because I'm not a pro. I'm kind of learning as I'm going along. One of the things that I picked up is when doing these washes, it's important not to go over the same area twice, because you just end up picking up the paint that you've laid down, and well, it becomes very hard to keep a consistent coating. I say that as I go back over the chin area, which I just did, but it's feeling a little like it's getting a little dry, so it should be fine. But if it was still wet, it'll start picking it up. The shadow here underneath the chin. I think I might need to use a smaller brush for some of this detail. I purposely didn't bother trying to build out all the detail from his armor or costume, because there's a lot of texture on it. There's a mesh texture everywhere, and it's just going to take forever to try to fill that in. And for the sake of time and what I'm actually just trying to do here, I just didn't think that was necessary. When doing portraits, I find that as long as you focus on this triangle here, which is the eyes, the nose, the mouth, and you get a nice amount of detail there, and you focus on that, everything else doesn't really matter as much, because it could just be suggestive. I think that's the proper term. And the viewer's mind kind of will figure out the details, which is actually a reason why I like doing these single color washes, wash type paintings, because it helps me not worry about mixing colors as much. And that's really something that I struggle with, is getting the right color. So it kind of works great for me, because I don't have to worry about it as much, and I can just focus on getting the shapes down and blending stuff, which is really the fun part of painting, for me anyways. Some of these details that I'm blocking in now, I didn't have in the original drawing. Well, I had them in the large sketch. Just didn't bother transferring them. I don't think it was necessary, but now that I'm adding these washes, it gives me an opportunity to kind of flesh them out a bit. And I see my hands constantly touching this gesso piece. That's fully dry, so I'll be able to get to that in a little bit. Either Rocket Ship Studio CR, Rocket Ship Studio CRG. Thanks for joining. Waiting for time on this is taking a lot longer than I thought it would. Definitely want to get to the gesso piece soon, but I do want to make sure that I have enough detail built out on this side before I move over, just so I have something compared to. I do have to say that this paper is a lot better than the standard stock that's being used for sketch cards. For the sketch cards I worked on anyways, which have been only upper deck so far. The stock does vary from set to set, but even on the thick cards, which are masterpieces, Premiere, which really ends up that it's just a bunch of normal 14-point cardstock pressed together and glued. It's not very good for paint. And after the 6 sets I've done, I think that I'd learn and stop trying to paint them, but that's what I like to do, so I'm gonna keep on struggling with it. The set that I'm finishing off now, which will be, I guess, displayed later, I did try to gesso a couple of cards, and I really liked the way that behaved. I really liked the result there, but I just don't know if it's a reasonable amount of work for a sketch card. Now this part should be gold, but I'm not going to introduce any yellows into this, so I'm just going to try to get some of the values down in red to give it some shape, and hopefully that'll be enough. Mine's a little too wet there. I try very hard to work from left to right, but As you can see, I don't always succeed, just because I tend to wander across the work area or canvas or whatever it is. So I'm just gonna do that in case I splash from paint or something. I don't want to destroy that piece before I haven't, like that part, before I've actually started trying to work on it. That just really pissed me off. Let's do that again. Okay, I'm just gotta get a little bit of detail in the neck piece, and then I gotta move on to the other side. But I do need to get this nice and dark because it's starting to fade a little bit into the rest of it. Now, one thing about acrylics, it does dry. Acrylics tend to dry lighter than what you see. So as some of the detail pieces start drying, since they're not as dark and I'm losing contrast, so I do have to go over it. Part of it might be just because I'm using a fair amount of water, and when things are wet they're shinier, and then as the water gets absorbed and evaporates into the environment, just leaving behind the pigment. Alright, so this is All right, definitely need to move on to the next one, to the other side. I think maybe I'll do a part 2. So once my hour limit kicks in on Instagram, let this upload, let everything dry a little bit, and then go live again a couple minutes later, and get some more work done on it. Alright, I just need to, there we go, get the eyes in, because they are key. Everything else I can worry about later if I have time. All right. I'm pretty happy with this so far. These pieces at the bottom, I'll let the edges bleed out because I'm going to try to come back later with darker and fill in the black areas, kind of have it fade out to the background. What else needs to be done? I should handle. Try to fade those edges a bit. All right, that's it for that piece. Let's see what we've got here. That's nice and dry. I am getting a little bit of curving in the paper, but yeah, can't do anything about it. So hopefully this is all in frame and in focus, and I'm gonna do the same thing. But this time I'm going to try to start from the left like I'm supposed to. So immediately I can tell that, and this is the same discovery from when I was doing the wash, it's not as strong because the gesso treatment, the paint is not getting absorbed the same way into the paper, because I believe the point of gesso is to change the way your material behaves. So it doesn't really matter what you're painting on. If you put a coat of gesso on it, it'll always have the same consistency and feel. But what it feels like, anyways, is that the paint's gliding on a lot nicer and a lot more even. Or evener is not a word, but it is going down smoother. And because the paper's not absorbing the water as fast, it gives me a little bit more flexibility to come back with a somewhat, there we go, with a little bit of a dry brush and push the pigment around. So I am liking that. Does mean that I might need to go over a couple, like an extra few times to get the intensity of the color I want, but that's okay. knowing that, I'm gonna have to go in and do the really dark spots right away so they can dry a bit before I go back in and do a second coat or wash. Drop my brush. Okay, so I got about 13 minutes on this broadcast. I can't believe how fast this time's passing. But it's only 2:30 where I am, so I think I'm okay to continue this. I still have plenty of time. So I definitely want to get to the white portion. I find that's when the piece really starts coming together. Even these simple wash type sketches, once you start adding in the highlights, that's when it really starts to pop, because that's when you really start getting contrast, and form is really just contrast. So I'm going to need to spend a little bit more time than I originally planned or thought that I'm going to need on this, but I'm going to do something, do it right. There's no reason why I can't spend a little bit more time on this. So far, I have to say that I do prefer the gesso side better. It is a little bit more tedious to work on, but it is give me a lot more control over the paint and how it interacts with the surface. And yeah, I really think that the main reason that is just that it's not drying as quickly. So I get to kind of push the paint around a little bit more. It's more, give me a little bit more control like watercolors. But it is drying significantly faster than watercolors would. So I do have kind of a balance, right? So I would compare this to, I guess, working in gouache, where you have the opaque paints, so you can cover over layers, but once they're dry they don't reactivate, unlike gouache, which you can theoretically reactivate forever and ever and ever, or until you just completely get the paper off, the paint off the surface, and then you can just burn it, then burn the ashes and start over. Yeah, I'm definitely liking gesso, the gessoed surface. Still wet. Kind of tempted to throw some glazing medium in the mix, but I think that would be a fair comparison. I think if I were to just do a piece without trying to get the comparison, I'd probably be using some medium in the gesso piece. Actually, I don't know. I'm gonna have to try that next time. But what I definitely think I should be doing is I should get a little blow dryer so I can force this stuff to dry a little quicker. Because I want to go back in the cheek there, but it's still wet, so I can't. When we're doing this on the paper side, it's just a matter of seconds before I could go back in and work an area. So not better, not worse, just different. So it's just a matter of getting used to it. I'm a firm believer in the concept that the materials don't really matter. Don't necessarily need to have the most expensive paints or the fancy brushes that are, you know, handmade by Tibetan monks and whatnot. Just gotta understand the materials you're working with, their limitations, and adapt and just create what you want to create. So I'm generally not obsessed with the brands that people of product. I see some of the artists that I follow and look up to and kind of try to learn from. I don't really care what brand paint or pencil or paper they're using. Do want to know what kind of medium it is, whether they're doing something in oil or acrylic or gouache or homemade paint or whatever it is, just so I can experiment myself and try to see what how those mediums behave. But I don't care about the brand. Like even acrylic paints, the paints that I'm using, they're student grade, whatever that means. They're, I think, like a couple of bucks a tube. I do have some more pricey paints, like some of the Liquitex heavy bodies or the golden paints, which are like, I think like $6 a tube or $7 a tube, and it's a low tube, so it's definitely more of an investment. I bought them just to see what the big hoopla is, and like I said, I'm not a pro by any means, so I'm probably not the best judge, but to me the pigment is definitely better and more consistent. But for what I do and the way I work, I didn't really see much of a difference. Where it does make a difference is with the whites. The cheap whites, which we'll see if I can get to them, if I get to the whites here, they're not very opaque, so to really get a strong white, like a highlight or something, you really need to do a couple layers or get it really thick. With the more I'm gonna call them premium paints, they're denser, I guess, so I don't know what makes them work better, but you don't need as much paint, and especially with titanium white, once you lay it down, it just covers everything. It's like whiteout, which is great if that's the effect you're looking for. And I used to use a jelly roller for that, but I find that they're not reliable, and you get blotches, and it's a real pain trying to clean up a blotch of paint or of ink from a jelly roller. So I'd much rather just use paint. So that was a little bit of a rant for no reason, but yeah. Okay, so looks like we're almost out of time for this first part, but I'm pretty happy with how far we got on this. I'm going to stop this stream and let it upload. It'll be in the story. Also highlight it once it's done and come back in 15 minutes or so, or once it's done uploading. I'm on a really fast connection here, so it shouldn't take too long, and also give this a chance to dry a little bit, and I'll come back and continue on it. Good opportunity for a little bathroom break. But really what I can see so far is the initial washes on the on the gesso piece are really faded, but as I'm doing this, the second and third washes, I guess because the pigment is really adhering to the surface, the color is getting a lot more saturated and a lot stronger, which I really like. Even these, like here where it's really wet, it's coming together well. To like try to darken these areas a bit. Almost there. So I'm going to leave everything exactly as it is. I'm not going to move the camera or change the lighting. Hopefully it stays exactly the same when we continue in about 15 minutes. Whoever joined so far, thanks for tuning in. Hopefully you'll come back shortly to see the rest of this. If not, you know, appreciate it either way. I will likely post this whole thing on YouTube. Just look for Dre Studios on YouTube. Might not be for a couple of days, depends on how big the files are, and yeah, but I will hyperlapse it so it's all a lot faster. Yeah, I'll just, do I still have time? I still have a bit of time. I want to get a little bit more value in here, and actually while I'm at it, let's try to darken this since we're going to let it dry for a bit. Okay, maybe I'm wrong, but I thought I only had, I could only do an hour at a time, but either way this has to dry both sides, so I will come back with part 2 shortly.